because it's some strange combination, unknowable combination of the windmills of the gods, the whims of the stars, the roll of the dice, landed me, someone from a completely different part of the world, into the city of Houston in 1996. Now, around the time I came here, on this landscape, the corporate landscape, there was a gem, a jewel, a brightly burning star, widely respected all over the world, spoken of in the highest of terms across the nation. Enron. Enron, when I came here, Enron was everywhere. And it's always a pride to have a company like this. The companies I used to look up to were Microsoft and Apple. But there was a difference. I couldn't understand how Enron made money. And I was a freshly minted MBA, so I even made an effort. But I didn't understand what they're doing. Then, in not a meeting like this, I ran into someone, I'd known him before, who was a computer contractor, working in Enron, dedicated to Enron. So I asked him, can you please explain to me how Enron makes money? But then he said something. He said, shall I tell you what I think? I think it's a terribly run company. I see people, just movers coming and moving furniture from this office to that office, from that office to this office. And I really think it's a badly run company. So the first I heard this opinion. And I couldn't help thinking, if you don't understand something, well, either I'm ignorant or there is some fraud. Something fraudulent about this. I won't be surprised if it shows up. And that is what happened. All the blame came on two people, or maybe you want to add Andrew Fastow. And here again, I started, there is something that we do. We glorify, and then we vilify. We tend to do that, but between this, there is a zone of objectivity where we do our best thinking. And in that zone, no part of this made sense to me. 2 people, 3 people, over and over you heard that they were able to recruit the best of the best from the best universities. Nobody could see that something is wrong. This doesn't make sense to me. What is happening if I'm not willing to glorify or vilify? This was a question that started playing in my mind. And more I began to get convinced that, amongst other things, this was a colossal failure of risk management. Just a thought that went into my mind. The risk managers didn't do their jobs, or they were suppressed so much that they couldn't do their jobs. First thing I want to deal with is leadership. It's so easy to criticize leadership. And no doubt they were fallible. And no doubt that there may have been flaws in their character. But I have reached this conclusion that were they so smart or so stupid that they just willfully let this happen? And I don't believe that I can credit more than 50% of the fault to willful fraudulence, to poor character. There's something more going on that we need to look into. And I believe that more than 50% of it comes down to negligence, ignorance, and delusion. And I'm not using this in a derogatory word. All of us are negligent of something. All of us are ignorant of many things. And all of us believe things that aren't true. But at a higher level, the more you do this, the greater the risk. And this is for your projects too. You don't know everything that's going on your projects. You just don't. You are ignorant of some things, and you have some assumptions which will prove to be untrue. I'll give you another example. In India, there was this company, Satyam, sort of similar to Enron, clever guys, tremendous profits, hiding, fudging the books. But after he got caught and went to jail, he said something that is worth paying attention to. He basically said, I felt like I was riding a tiger, and once I got on, there was no way for me to get off without being eaten by it. And as a risk manager or project manager, and your project is going wrong, we can very well find ourselves in this situation if we don't know how to get off. But first, I want to plant a seed. I want you to hold 2 thoughts and 2 critical skills in your mind right till the end of the presentation. The first one comes from Richard Feynman. It comes from the world of academia. He's a Nobel Prize winner, a great physicist, author, very famous man. And he told his students in one of his lectures, there's a famous series of Feynman lectures, the first rule is you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. We are doing work. We want the results. We tend to skew, we tend to misread it. And he said this is a fundamental flaw in science. You have to figure out what is happening. Don't fool yourself. The first rule is that you don't fool yourself. And this is almost something you should, before you take on the role of a risk manager or you hire one, am I willing not to fool myself? Because I am the easiest person to fool when I want something to be a certain way. So hold this thought in mind. It happens to all of us. This is biology. This is our inner programming. Second comes from a sort of half politician, successful author from quite a while ago. He was kind of involved in politics, and it is extremely difficult to make a man understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. It is extremely difficult to make a person understand something when their values or their status or something along those lines depends on them not understanding it. And frequently, if you're a risk manager and you have to report to your boss, you will face this. What will you do then? In fact, have any of you all faced this? At the receiving end or the giving end? Sure. And that's just being human. We are not rational machines. We have all these systems inside of us that make us not hear what we don't want to hear. Critical skill to overcome this objectivity, and I mean be neurotically rational. Keep saying to yourself, Rashid, this is the time to be neurotically rational. There are some times when I've got to be intuitive, sometimes I've got to judge, but when doing this work, be neurotically rational. And I believe this is one of the most underrated qualities, equanimity, complete balance, calmness. You don't get excited. You look at everything from all points of view. It's one of the highest skills to develop even in your relationships with others. Equanimity comes down to this: be unattached to whatever the outcome is. Whichever way the data takes me, whatever conclusions I have to reach, I'm not going to be attached to it. It's a great skill to develop. And the second one, I'll just touch on it now, because none of you will think it's essential to risk management. I'll make my case later on. Be willing to campaign. Be willing to persuade. I want you to vote for risk management. Look at it like an unending task. Not me give you my report and walk away. If you want the company to be safe, are you willing to take on the work of a campaigner? On our agenda, we have two items: prospect theory and the power of noticing. Let's summarize where we've been. Memorize this, folks. Memorize this. Don't forget. When confronting losses, decision makers are more likely to take risks. You are a decision maker and you will confront losses. Add this language: prospect theory, domain of gains, domain of losses. Inattentional blindness, motivated blindness, slippery slope. So let's close now. Let's go back to where we were. Two closing thoughts, two critical skills. The first rule is that you don't fool yourself. And you are the easiest person to fool. All of us, all of us. It is very difficult to convince a man of something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And I can tell you both these quotes. I have a twin brother, he's a doctor. He's written a book about pitfalls in the intensive care where he works. And I got both these quotes from his book. It happens everywhere. Critical skill, be objective, hard as it is, be objective. And it's a skill that can be developed. People who worked with Obama said he had this skill extraordinarily. And many people you work with, they don't feel they're criticizing, they want to hear it. Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, he promised himself, I will never, the Bay of Pigs was a disaster. He believed someone else was doing it in the past, he believed it. From then onwards, you will give me an outside perspective. He insisted on it. Objectivity. Laugh at yourself, be neurotically rational. This is the time for neurotically rational, there's a time to be intuitive, there's a time to have discussions, but sometime I will shut down everything and I will be neurotically rational. Equanimity. Balanced. Are we a balanced team? Are we thinking in a balanced way, or are we just fighting for one side? It's a good skill to have, not the only one. Be non-attached to outcomes. That really is what this talk is entirely about. And now I come down to the last one, be willing to campaign. This is what he writes in the book. Now I'm going to ask you to read what I've highlighted. Can you read it? Can everyone read it? No? Okay, here we go. The Partial Test Ban Treaty was signed and ratified for one overwhelming reason, because Kennedy campaigned for it. He was a gifted campaigner. In 6 campaigns, he never lost. And he triumphed again in the summer of '63. And this might seem like just something to read, but when I read this, electrical storms went off in my head. If Kennedy had not committed to being a good speaker, when he was a young man, he was covering the war in the United Kingdom. He admired Churchill greatly. He would sit down and put on Churchill records and practice and practice. He knew that oratory was very powerful. He relished it. He championed it. He aspired to greatness in it from time he was young. And that skill, he was able to cajole, charm, twist everybody's arms, but we have to get to peace. He stopped saying that I'm the president, I'm giving you orders, you will do it, because he knew that would fail. Wilson Woodrow, he studied that. Wilson Woodrow failed in the League of Nations. He basically gave orders saying, I'll do this. Kennedy knew that this won't work. He campaigned for it. He's a Democrat, he would get a senator from the Republican side to make the announcement for here and there. I mean, he played a masterful game, but he treated it like a campaign. And that is what none of you all will think, that this is an essential skill. If you're hiring a risk manager and he's the smartest guy but he can't convince anyone, you're not taking a good hire. Are you willing to be a powerful, persuasive speaker? I am campaigning. It's an unending campaign. Risk management is an unending campaign. I have to speak up on behalf of risk routinely. I have to use all the skills of a skillful communicator, of a campaigning manager. I have to convince you. I have to make rational arguments, but that's just one part of it. At some point, you will not be able to understand what I'm saying, especially if your salary depends on it, or your status or your job depends on it. At that point, you have another weapon. It's called charm. It's a skill that you can learn. I'm not talking about artful manipulation. I'm not talking about artful flattery. Charm is a way we get to like each other. We get to work with one another. It doesn't matter if things are going wrong. I like Jim. I will work with him. I know he will yell at me for something I've done today. But if you understand that charm is a powerful campaigning skill, you can use it. So, and then finally, that's just the second part of it. The third is you have to be willing to cajole. Jim, what are you doing on this project? Do you want us to end up like Enron? This ability to approach, almost like we have 3 parts in our brain: the threatened part, the reptile part. You've got to communicate to it. We have the emotional part. We have to be able to communicate. I want to work with this person. We want to succeed. We have the rational part. This skill is, I say, a top skill that any risk manager should develop. And I'm telling you, because I somehow got fascinated by public speaking and wrote a book on it. I can't tell you how much that this is a secret hiding in plain sight. The ability, someone will come and talk about change management and risk management for 1 month and no one will listen to him. And a great speaker will come in half an hour and everybody's on board. I mean, surely this is worth studying. It should be part, if you have a risk manager, he must be willing to campaign. You are a risk manager. Are you willing to step up and campaign on behalf of risk management, knowing it will get extremely uncomfortable, not slightly uncomfortable? But the ability, if you can't convince your boss, you can say it's on me. I have to find another method. My top job is not to serve the boss. It is to serve the project. Our survival is key before we talk about other things. And if we fail in risk management, we fail in that. So I'll leave you with this. Turn to your neighbor and say, I'm going to campaign. Thank you.